The scream of breaking china echoed through the First National Bank of Glenrio, as Penelope Crawford hurled her mother's imported tea set against the polished mahogany wall, watching 15 years of careful etiquette lessons shatter into 1,000 irreparable pieces. Her father stood in the doorway of his private office, his silver mustache twitching with barely contained fury, while her mother clutched her pearls with theatrical despair. They had just informed Penelope, on this sweltering afternoon in July of 1879, that she was to marry Richard Thornton, a railroad magnate from Denver who was 42 years old and had buried 2 wives already. Penelope was 20 years old, and the thought of becoming the third Mrs. Thornton made her stomach twist with revulsion. "You will do as you are told," Charles Crawford said, his voice dropping to that dangerous whisper he used when foreclosing on desperate families. "Richard Thornton can expand my banking interests across 3 territories. This marriage will secure our family's position for generations." Penelope looked at her father, really looked at him, and saw nothing but cold calculation in his eyes. She had always known he valued money above all else, but she had foolishly believed that somewhere beneath his ruthless exterior he harbored genuine affection for his only daughter. That illusion crumbled as thoroughly as the shattered porcelain at her feet. "I will not marry him," Penelope said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "You cannot force me." Her father's laugh was harsh and bitter. "Cannot, my dear girl, you have no income, no property, and no prospects beyond what I provide. You will marry Richard Thornton in 3 months' time, or you will find yourself with nothing. Not a penny, not a stitch of clothing beyond what you wear, not a roof over your ungrateful head." Martha Crawford, her mother, finally found her voice. "Penelope, darling, you are being unreasonable. Richard is a fine man, well established with excellent connections. Many girls would be grateful for such an opportunity." "Then let those many girls marry him," Penelope shot back. "I will not be sold like livestock to advance father's business interests." She turned and swept from the room before either parent could respond, her silk skirts rustling with her agitation. She climbed the stairs to her bedroom 2 at a time, abandoning all pretense of the graceful glide she had been taught since childhood. Once inside, she locked the door and leaned against it, her heart pounding. The room felt like a cage. The pink wallpaper with its delicate rose pattern, the canopy bed with its layers of white lace, the wardrobe full of expensive dresses, all of it suddenly seemed like the trappings of a prison. She had lived her entire life within the confines of her father's expectations, molded and shaped into the perfect banker's daughter, an asset to be traded when the price was right. Penelope walked to her window and looked out over the town of Glenrio. From her vantage point on the hill where the largest houses stood, she could see the entire settlement spread below. Main Street cut through the center like a dusty ribbon, lined with false-fronted buildings that promised more grandeur than they delivered. The bank, her father's pride, occupied the most prominent corner, its brick facade a monument to accumulated wealth. Beyond the town, the land stretched endlessly in every direction, brown and unforgiving under the relentless New Mexico sun. In the distance, she could see the corrals and training grounds where the local ranchers brought their horses. Even from here, she could make out the figures of men working with the animals, their movements fluid and purposeful. She had always been fascinated by horses, though her interest had been deemed inappropriate for a young lady of her station. Her father had allowed her to ride, but only side saddle on a docile mare, always accompanied by a groom, always confined to approved paths. The idea of working with horses, truly understanding them, training them, had remained a distant dream. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. "Miss Penelope," It was Rose, the housemaid, her voice tentative. "Your mother says you are to come down for dinner in an hour." "Tell her I am not hungry," Penelope called back. "She said you would say that, miss. She says if you do not come down, your father will have the door removed from its hinges." Penelope closed her eyes. Of course he would. Charles Crawford did not tolerate defiance even from his own daughter. She would have to face them eventually, and prolonging the inevitable would only make things worse. "Tell her I will be down," Penelope said finally. She heard Rose's footsteps retreating down the hall. Moving mechanically, Penelope went to her washstand and splashed cool water on her face. Her reflection in the mirror showed flushed cheeks and bright eyes that threatened tears she refused to shed. She had her mother's delicate features and her father's strong jaw, an unfortunate combination that her aunt had once described as handsome rather than pretty. Her dark hair, usually arranged in an elaborate style, had begun to escape its pins, giving her a wild appearance that would horrify her mother. Penelope repinned her hair with shaking hands and changed into a dinner dress of deep blue silk. The dress was beautiful and expensive, like everything her father provided, and it felt like a costume she was forced to wear in a play she had never agreed to perform. Dinner was exactly as terrible as she had anticipated. The dining room, with its long table and crystal chandelier, felt cavernous despite the three of them sitting in their usual places. Her father at the head, her mother to his right, Penelope to his left. The servants moved silently, serving course after course of food that Penelope could barely taste. Charles Crawford held forth on the advantages of the Thornton alliance, outlining the business opportunities, as if discussing the purchase of a building rather than his daughter's future. Martha offered occasional comments about wedding preparations and the importance of making a good impression on Denver society. Neither seemed to require or expect Penelope's participation in the conversation. When the dessert plates were finally cleared, Penelope excused herself and escaped back to her room. She lay awake long into the night, staring at the ceiling and trying to imagine a way out of the trap that had closed around her. By the time the sky began to lighten with the approaching dawn, she had the beginnings of a plan. The next morning, Penelope rose early and dressed in her simplest day dress, a practical brown cotton that she normally wore only for gardening. She pinned her hair into a simple bun and left the house before her parents were awake, telling the surprised cook that she was going for a walk to clear her head. Instead of heading toward the genteel streets where morning walks were appropriate for young ladies, Penelope turned her steps toward the edge of town, where the training corrals were located. She had no clear objective, only a vague idea that if she could not have freedom, she might at least steal a glimpse of it. The corrals were already busy despite the early hour. The coolness of morning was the best time to work with horses before the brutal heat of the day made any vigorous activity unbearable. Penelope stood outside the fence, watching as several men worked with different animals. Her attention was drawn to one corral in particular, where a tall man was working with a young stallion. The horse was clearly fractious, tossing its head and dancing away from the man's approach. But the man moved with patient confidence, never rushing, never forcing. He spoke in a low voice that Penelope could not quite hear, and gradually, incrementally, the horse began to calm. Penelope found herself leaning against the fence, transfixed. She had never seen anyone work with a horse like this, with such respect for the animal's nature. The man wore dusty denim trousers and a faded blue shirt, his dark hair curling slightly beneath a well-worn hat. Even from a distance, she could see the lean strength in his frame, the kind of fitness that came from hard physical work rather than gymnasium exercises. She was so absorbed in watching that she did not notice the older man who had approached until he spoke. "Impressive, is he not?" Penelope jumped and turned to find a weathered man with kind eyes and a graying beard standing beside her. He wore clothing similar to the younger man's and had the same comfortable ease around the horses. "Yes," Penelope admitted, seeing no point in pretending she had not been staring. "I have never seen anyone work with a horse that way. That is my nephew, Ethan Mallory. Best horse trainer in 3 territories, if I do say so myself. Got a gift for it, he does. Can gentle the wildest Mustang without breaking its spirit." "I did not know that was possible," Penelope said. "I thought horses had to be broken." The older man made a dismissive sound. "That is what most folks think. Break their spirit, break their will, make them submit through fear. But Ethan, he is different. He partners with them, earns their trust. Takes longer, but you end up with a horse that works with you instead of just obeying out of fear." Penelope watched as Ethan finally reached the stallion, running his hand along its neck in a gentle stroke. The horse's ears, which had been pinned back in agitation, slowly relaxed and swiveled forward. "I would give anything to learn to do that," Penelope said, the words escaping before she could stop them. The older man looked at her with interest. "Would you now? Are you the Crawford girl?" Penelope felt her cheeks warm. Of course everyone in Glenrio would know who she was. "Yes, I am Penelope Crawford. Heard your father is planning a big wedding, marrying you off to some railroad man." The casual mention of her impending doom made Penelope's throat tighten. "That is his plan, yes, but not yours." Penelope met the man's eyes and saw understanding there, though how he could possibly understand her situation, she could not imagine. "No, not mine." He was quiet for a moment, then seemed to come to a decision. "Name is Samuel Mallory. That is my nephew Ethan, as I said, and this is our business, Mallory Horse Training. We take in horses that need work, train them for their owners. We also catch and train wild Mustangs to sell. It is good, honest work." "It sounds wonderful," Penelope said wistfully. "We could use some help around here," Samuel said slowly. "Nothing too demanding, mind you. Mucking stalls, feeding, that sort of thing. We have got more work than the 2 of us can handle properly. Does not pay much, but if someone wanted to learn about horses, they would get an education better than any finishing school could provide." Penelope stared at him. "Are you offering me a job?" "I am offering you an opportunity," Samuel corrected. "What you do with it is up to you. But I have a feeling you did not walk all the way down here just to admire the view." He was right. She had come here looking for something, though she had not known what until this moment. This was her escape, at least temporarily. Working here, learning about horses, it would give her something of her own, something her father had not chosen for her. "My father would never allow it," Penelope said, reality crashing back. "Then I suppose the question is whether you plan to tell him," Samuel said mildly. Penelope's heart began to race. The idea was outrageous. A banker's daughter working in corrals like a common laborer. It was unthinkable, it was improper, it was exactly what she wanted. "When would I start?" she asked. Samuel grinned. "How about tomorrow morning? Come at dawn before the town is awake. Wear clothes you do not mind getting dirty." Penelope nodded, a reckless excitement building in her chest. "I will be here." She walked back to town feeling lighter than she had in days. The weight of her father's demands had not disappeared, but for the first time she had taken an action of her own, made a choice that belonged to her alone. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Penelope endured her mother's discussions about wedding preparations, nodded politely through her father's lecture about proper behavior for the future Mrs. Thornton, and counted the hours until she could put her plan into action. That night, she barely slept, afraid she would oversleep and miss her chance. When the first light of dawn crept through her window, she rose and dressed quickly in the oldest clothes she owned, a cotton dress she had worn for gardening years ago and had kept hidden in the back of her wardrobe. She crept down the back stairs and slipped out of the house while the servants were still in their quarters. The walk to the corrals felt longer in the pre-dawn dimness, and Penelope's courage wavered several times. What was she doing? This was madness. If her father found out, there would be consequences beyond her imagining. But when she reached the corrals and saw Samuel already there, preparing feed for the horses, her resolve strengthened. This was her choice. This was her rebellion. And for the first time in her life, she was going to do something simply because she wanted to. "Good morning, Miss Crawford," Samuel said cheerfully. "Ready for your first day? Please just call me Penelope," she said. "And yes, I am ready." Samuel handed her a bucket and a shovel. "We will start with the basics. These stalls need cleaning. It is not glamorous work, but it is necessary." Penelope took the tools and set to work. Within minutes, she understood what Samuel had meant. The work was hot, hard, and decidedly unglamorous. The smell alone was enough to make her eyes water. But there was something satisfying about it too, something real and honest that her life had been missing. She was so focused on her task that she did not realize Ethan had approached until he spoke. "Uncle Sam, who is this?" His voice was deep and pleasant, with a hint of curiosity rather than hostility. Penelope looked up and found herself meeting his eyes for the first time. They were a remarkable shade of green, bright against his sun-tanned skin. Up close, she could see he was younger than she had initially thought, probably not much older than her own 20 years. "This is Penelope," Samuel said. "She is going to be helping us out." Ethan's eyebrows rose. "Is that right?" He looked at Penelope more carefully, taking in her fine features and the quality of even her oldest dress. "You do not look like you have done much stall mucking before." "I have not," Penelope admitted, "but I can learn." Something flickered in Ethan's expression, a mix of amusement and respect. "I suppose we will see. Can you ride?" "Only side saddle and only a very gentle mare." Ethan made a sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. "Well, that will not do you much good here. If you are serious about learning, you need to learn to ride properly." "I am serious," Penelope said firmly. "Then finish with those stalls, and I will give you your first real riding lesson." The next few hours were among the most challenging of Penelope's life. The physical labor was harder than anything she had ever attempted. By the time she finished cleaning the stalls, her hands were blistered, her back ached, and she smelled distinctly of horse manure. But she felt more alive than she had in years. Ethan was true to his word. He let out a gentle mare named Daisy and showed Penelope how to ride astride rather than side saddle. The sensation of having the horse between her legs instead of sitting sideways was strange at first, but it gave her so much more control and balance. Ethan was a patient teacher, explaining everything carefully, never mocking her mistakes. "You have good instincts," he said after she had been riding for half an hour. "Most beginners are too tense, too controlling. You are learning to work with the horse instead of against it." The praise, simple as it was, warmed Penelope more than any of the elaborate compliments she had received at social functions. This was earned approval, based on her actual ability rather than her father's money or her appearance. When the sun climbed high enough to make work uncomfortable, Samuel called a halt. "That is enough for today. You did well, Penelope. If you want to come back tomorrow, we will be here." "I will be here," Penelope promised. She walked back to town in a daze, her muscles protesting every step. She had just enough time to sneak back into the house and change before her mother came looking for her. The hot bath she drew to wash away the evidence of her morning's work stung her blistered hands, but she did not care. She had found something worth the pain. Over the following weeks, Penelope developed a careful routine. She would rise before dawn, work at the corrals until mid-morning, then return home to fulfill her obligations as the banker's daughter. She became adept at making excuses for her early morning absences and her increased appetite. Her mother attributed her daughter's odd behavior to pre-wedding nerves and largely left her alone. During those precious morning hours, Penelope learned more than she had thought possible. Samuel taught her the practical aspects of horse care, how to recognize signs of illness or injury, the proper way to groom and feed. But it was Ethan who truly captured her interest. Watching him work with horses was like watching an artist create. He had an intuitive understanding of horse behavior, an ability to read their body language and respond appropriately. He never raised his voice, never used force. Instead, he used patience, consistency, and genuine respect for the animal he was working with. "The key," he explained one morning as they watched a young horse he was training, "is to understand that horses are prey animals. Their instinct is always to run from danger. When you force them, when you use fear to control them, you are just confirming their worst instincts. But if you can show them that you are not a threat, that working with you is actually beneficial, they will choose to partner with you." "Why do so few people train this way?" Penelope asked. Ethan shrugged. "It takes longer. It requires patience and understanding that most people do not want to invest. It is easier to just break a horse's will and be done with it. But those horses never reach their full potential. They do what they are told out of fear, but they do not give you their heart." His words resonated with Penelope in ways he could not possibly know. She felt like one of those broken horses, being forced into a shape that suited her father's purposes rather than her own nature. The wedding was now only 6 weeks away, and every day the pressure increased. She found herself spending more time talking with Ethan between lessons. At first, their conversations centered on horses, but gradually they expanded to include other topics. She learned that he had grown up on a ranch in Texas, that his parents had died in a cholera epidemic when he was 15, and that he had come to live with his Uncle Samuel after that. He had worked with horses his entire life and could not imagine doing anything else. In turn, Penelope found herself sharing things she had never told anyone. Her frustration with the limitations placed on her because of her gender and her father's expectations. Her love of reading, which her mother considered excessive and unfeminine. Her secret dream of seeing the world beyond Glenrio, of experiencing life outside the narrow confines of proper society. Ethan listened without judgment, and Penelope found his acceptance intoxicating. Around him, she did not have to pretend to be someone she was not. He saw her covered in dirt and sweat, saw her struggle and fail and try again, and he treated her with more respect than any of her father's social circle ever had in their finest ballrooms. One morning, about a month after she had started working at the corrals, Ethan was training a particularly challenging horse, a wild Mustang that had been captured in the high desert. The horse was magnificent, a bay stallion with a black mane and intelligent eyes that held equal parts fear and defiance. "This one is going to take time," Ethan said, watching the horse circle the training pen at a nervous trot. "He has been free his whole life. He does not understand why he should trust humans." "Will you be able to train him?" Penelope asked. "Eventually. The question is not whether I can train him, but whether I can do it in a way that preserves what makes him special. See how he moves. That is pure wild grace. I do not want to take that away from him. I just want to help him understand that he can be safe with us." The training session lasted for hours. Penelope watched, fascinated as Ethan slowly, incrementally, gained the horse's trust. He moved around the pen, positioning himself in ways that encouraged the horse to turn toward him rather than away. When the horse finally took a step in his direction, Ethan immediately backed away, releasing the pressure, rewarding the smallest try. "That is the foundation," Ethan explained during a break. "Rewarding the try. If I only reward the perfect response, the horse will never learn. But if I acknowledge even the smallest effort, even just a thought about trying, then I am building a conversation." Penelope found herself thinking about those words long after she returned home. A conversation, built on mutual respect and understanding. It was so different from everything she had been taught about relationships, where women were expected to submit and obey without question. That evening, during another excruciating dinner discussion about wedding preparations, Penelope's mother mentioned that Richard Thornton would be arriving in Glenrio the following week to finalize the arrangements. "He is bringing his daughters from his previous marriages," Martha said brightly. "It will be a wonderful opportunity for you to meet them and begin building your relationship as their new mother." Penelope felt her appetite vanish. She had tried not to think too much about the reality of marrying Richard Thornton, but now it was becoming unavoidable. In just 5 weeks, she would be his wife. She would have to leave Glenrio, leave the corrals, leave everything she had come to care about, leave Ethan. The thought hit her with unexpected force. When had Ethan become so important to her? When had his morning greeting become the thing she looked forward to most? When had his smile started making her heart race? She excused herself from dinner early, claiming a headache, and retreated to her room. But instead of sleeping, she sat by her window and stared out at the darkness, trying to sort through the tangled emotions in her chest. She was falling in love with Ethan Mallory. She, who had never believed in romantic love, who had dismissed it as foolish sentiment, was falling completely and hopelessly in love with a horse trainer who had dirt under his fingernails and calluses on his hands and treated her like an equal. The realization was both wonderful and terrible. Wonderful because love, she was discovering, was not the weak emotion she had been led to believe. It was powerful and transformative, making her braver and stronger than she had ever been. Terrible because it was impossible. She was engaged to another man, committed to a future that had been decided for her. What she wanted, what she felt, was irrelevant. The next morning, Penelope almost did not go to the corrals. It would be easier, she thought, to start distancing herself now, to begin the process of forgetting. But she could not do it. The thought of missing even one morning with Ethan was unbearable. When she arrived, she found Ethan already working with the bay mustang. The horse had made remarkable progress, and today, Ethan was introducing the saddle. Penelope watched as he showed the horse the saddle, let it smell and investigate, then gently placed it on the horse's back. The mustang tensed but did not panic, a testament to the trust Ethan had built. "You are doing so well," Penelope said during a break. "He trusts you completely." Ethan smiled and Penelope's heart clenched. Trust is everything. Without it, you have nothing real, just the appearance of cooperation with fear underneath. "My father would say that fear is an acceptable basis for obedience," Penelope said quietly. Ethan's smile faded. "Your father sounds like someone I would not like very much. Most people think he is very impressive, powerful, successful, respected." "Feared and respected are not the same thing," Ethan said, though a lot of folks confuse the two. They were quiet for a moment, then Ethan said, "I hear Richard Thornton is coming to town." Penelope's head snapped up. "How did you know about that? Glenrio is a small town. Folks talk. Is it true you are engaged to him?" There was no point in denying it. "Yes. Do you love him?" The question was blunt, almost rude by polite society standards, but Penelope found she appreciated the directness. "I have never even met him." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Then why are you marrying him?" "Because my father has decided it will benefit his business interests." "Because I have no money of my own and no way to support myself." "Because in the world I live in, daughters are assets to be traded, not people with their own desires." "That is not right." "No," Penelope agreed, "but it is reality." Ethan looked at her for a long moment, his green eyes intense. "What if there was another option?" "What do you mean?" "What if you did not have to marry him? What if you could choose your own path?" "That is a fantasy," Penelope said, though her heart was pounding. "I have no skills, no way to earn a living. I've been raised to be decorative and obedient, nothing more." "You have learned a lot in the past month," Ethan pointed out. "You're good with horses. You could do this work, really do it if you wanted to." "My father would never allow it. If I refuse to marry Richard Thornton, he will disown me." "I would have nothing." "You would have your freedom," Ethan said quietly. "Is not that worth something?" Penelope wanted to say yes, wanted to believe it was that simple. But the reality of her situation was more complex. Where would she live? How would she support herself? The little money Samuel paid her would barely cover room and board at the cheapest boarding house. And even that assumed she could find a landlord willing to rent to a single woman without references or reputation. "I have to go," she said abruptly, unable to continue the conversation. "I will see you tomorrow." She fled before Ethan could respond, her mind in turmoil. The walk back to town did nothing to calm her thoughts. Ethan's words kept echoing in her head. What if there was another option? What if she could choose her own path? But every time hope tried to bloom, reality crushed it. She was trapped as surely as any of the wild horses that were brought to the corrals, and unlike them, she could not see a way to freedom that did not involve complete destruction of everything she had known. Richard Thornton arrived in Glenrio 3 days later. Penelope's first glimpse of her future husband came when his carriage pulled up in front of the bank. He was a large man, not tall but broad, with graying hair and a florid complexion that spoke of too much rich food and whiskey. He moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to having his every wish granted immediately. His daughters were with him, 2 girls who looked to be 15 and 17. They regarded Penelope with poorly concealed hostility, making it clear they had no interest in acquiring a stepmother barely older than themselves. The formal meeting took place in her father's study. Richard Thornton looked at Penelope the way her father looked at properties he was considering purchasing, with cool assessment rather than any warmth or affection. "You are prettier than I expected," he said, and it was not a compliment. "Your father said you were handsome rather than beautiful, but I think you will do nicely." Penelope bit back a sharp response. Her mother had coached her extensively on proper behavior during this visit. She was to be pleasant, agreeable, and above all, grateful for Richard's attention. "You are too kind," she managed, the words tasting like ash. "I understand you have been reading quite a lot," Richard continued. "Your father assures me this is not a deeply ingrained habit. I do not approve of excessive reading in women. It gives them strange ideas." "I see," Penelope said carefully. "Once we are married, I will expect you to focus on your proper duties. Managing my household, hosting social functions, and of course, providing me with a son. My previous wives failed in that regard. I trust you will be more successful." The casual dismissal of his dead wives, reduced to nothing more than their failure to produce a male heir, made Penelope's blood boil. But she kept her expression neutral, her hands folded demurely in her lap, playing the role she had been assigned. The visit lasted 2 hours that felt like an eternity. When Richard and his daughters finally left, With plans to return for the wedding in just over a month, Penelope felt physically ill. That night, she could not sleep. She kept seeing Richard's assessing stare, hearing his dismissive tone. The life stretching before her was a cage more confining than her father's house, and the door was closing rapidly. When dawn came, Penelope dressed and headed to the corrals with grim determination. If she only had a few more weeks of freedom, she was going to savor every moment. Ethan took one look at her face and said, "You met him." It was not a question. Penelope nodded, not trusting her voice. And he is exactly what I expected, arrogant, controlling, and dismissive. He informed me that excessive reading gives women strange ideas and that he expects me to provide him with a son since his previous wives failed to do so. Ethan's expression darkened. Failed to do so. They died. Which in his view is the ultimate failure, Penelope said bitterly. I am to be his third attempt at acquiring a male heir. You cannot marry him, Ethan said flatly. I do not have a choice. There is always a choice. Not for me, Penelope said. Not in my world. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, then he said, "Come with me. I want to show you something." He led her away from the training corrals, out past the last buildings of Glenrio, to where the open range began. They walked in silence for nearly half an hour until they reached a small rise that overlooked miles of empty land. See that? Ethan gestured to the vast expanse before them. That is freedom. No walls, no limits, just open sky and endless possibility. That is what horses know before we catch them. That is what they remember even after we have trained them. It is beautiful, Penelope said softly. It is terrifying, Ethan countered. No safety, no guarantees. You could die of thirst or be eaten by wolves, but you would be free. The question is, what is freedom worth to you? Is it worth the fear? Is it worth giving up safety and security? Penelope understood what he was really asking. He was offering her an alternative, a way out, even if he had not said it in so many words. What are you suggesting? She asked, though she thought she knew. Ethan turned to face her fully. I am suggesting that you do not have to be what your father wants you to be. I am suggesting that there are other ways to live if you are brave enough to choose them. I am not brave, Penelope said. Yes, you are, Ethan said firmly. You have been coming here every morning for weeks, knowing that if your father found out there would be consequences. You have been doing hard physical labor that most women of your station would consider beneath them. You have been learning and growing and becoming your own person. That takes courage. His words broke something open inside Penelope. She felt tears building, tears she had been holding back for weeks, and suddenly they were streaming down her face. Ethan did not look away or tell her to compose herself. Instead, he stepped closer and put his arms around her, holding her while she cried. His embrace felt nothing like the stiff, formal embraces she had received from dancing partners at social events. This was warm and solid and real. She could feel his heartbeat, strong and steady, and smell the familiar scent of horses and leather and sun-warmed cotton. When her tears finally subsided, she remained in his arms, not wanting to move, not wanting to return to reality. I think I am falling in love with you, she whispered into his shirt. She felt him go still, then his arms tightened around her. I know I am falling in love with you, he said. I have been trying not to, because you are engaged to another man and I have no right to my feelings. But I cannot help it. You are everything I never knew I wanted. Penelope pulled back enough to look up at him. His green eyes were intense, filled with emotion that made her breath catch. I do not know what to do, she admitted. I do not know how to choose between the life I have been given and the life I want. Then do not choose yet, Ethan said. We still have a few weeks. Let us take that time to figure something out. It was not a solution, but it was hope, and hope was something Penelope had been lacking. She nodded, and Ethan smiled, then slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he lowered his head and kissed her. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, a question rather than a demand. Penelope responded instinctively, rising on her toes to meet him, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. The kiss deepened, becoming more certain, and Penelope felt something ignite inside her, a heat that had nothing to do with the New Mexico sun. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "We will find a way," he said. "I promise you, Penelope, we will find a way." They walked back to the corrals hand in hand, and for the first time since her father had announced her engagement, Penelope felt genuinely hopeful. Over the following days, Penelope and Ethan snatched moments together whenever they could. Their relationship deepened from friendship to something more profound. They talked about everything, their dreams and fears, their hopes for the future. Ethan shared his vision of expanding the horse training business, maybe even buying his own ranch someday. Penelope talked about her love of reading, her desire to see more of the world, her frustration with the limited options available to women. "If you could do anything," Ethan asked one morning as they groomed horses together, "what would you do?" Penelope thought about it. "I would want to work with horses like this. I would want to travel, see different places. I would want to read whatever I wanted and have conversations about ideas instead of just gossip and social niceties. I would want to choose my own path instead of having it chosen for me." "All of that is possible," Ethan said. "Maybe not easy, but possible." "Not for a woman alone," Penelope pointed out. "The world is not kind to women without male protection." "Then do not be alone," Ethan said. He set down the brush he had been using and turned to face her fully. "Marry me instead." Penelope's heart leaped, but reality crashed down immediately. "My father would never give his consent." "Then we do not ask for it. We just go, leave Glenrio, start somewhere fresh. We could go to California or up to Colorado, anywhere we want." "With what money?" Penelope asked, though she desperately wanted to believe it could work. "You said yourself that the training business barely supports you and Samuel." "We would figure it out," Ethan insisted. "It would not be easy and it would not be comfortable, at least not at first. But we would be together, and we would be free." Penelope wanted to say yes. Every part of her wanted to throw caution aside and run away with Ethan, consequences be damned. But she had been raised to be practical, and she could not ignore the very real difficulties they would face. "Let me think about it," she said finally. "This is not a decision I can make lightly." Ethan looked disappointed but nodded. "I understand, but Penelope, the wedding is in 3 weeks. We do not have unlimited time." She knew he was right. The deadline was approaching with terrifying speed. Every day brought her closer to becoming Mrs. Richard Thornton, and the thought made her increasingly desperate. That evening, her father called her into his study. Penelope went with a sense of foreboding that proved well-founded. "I have been hearing disturbing reports," Charles Crawford said without preamble. "It seems you have been spending your mornings at the horse corrals, working like a common laborer." Penelope's blood ran cold. "Who told you that?" "It does not matter who told me. What matters is that it stops immediately. I will not have my daughter degrading herself and embarrassing this family. You are to be married to an important man, and I will not have him hear rumors about your inappropriate behavior." "There is nothing inappropriate about honest work," Penelope said, finding her courage. Her father's face darkened. "You will not speak back to me, girl. You are forbidden from going to those corrals again. You will remain in this house until the wedding, and you will comport yourself with the dignity befitting your station." "Do I make myself clear?" "Perfectly clear," Penelope said, her voice shaking with suppressed emotion. "Good. Now get out of my sight." Penelope fled to her room and immediately began to pace. Her father had essentially made her a prisoner in her own home. She had 3 weeks until the wedding, 3 weeks to figure out what to do, and now she could not even see Ethan. But if she had learned anything from watching Ethan train horses, it was that there was always another way. You just had to be patient and creative enough to find it. Late that night, after the house was dark and quiet, Penelope crept out of her room and down the back stairs. She had never snuck out before, had never broken her father's rules so blatantly, but desperate times called for desperate measures. The town was eerily quiet as she made her way through the dark streets. She had never been out alone at night, and every shadow seemed threatening. But she pressed on, driven by the need to see Ethan, to tell him what had happened. The small house where Ethan and Samuel lived was dark, but Penelope could not come all this way only to turn back. She threw a pebble at what she hoped was Ethan's window. Nothing happened. She tried again, and this time she heard movement inside. A moment later, the door opened and Ethan appeared, hastily dressed, looking alarmed. "Penelope, what are you doing here? Is something wrong?" "Everything is wrong," she said, and the words started pouring out. She told him about her father's discovery, about being confined to the house, about the impossibility of their situation. Ethan listened without interrupting, and when she finished, he took both her hands in his. "Then we leave now, tonight. We do not wait for the wedding, we just go." "How?" Penelope asked. "I have no money, no clothes except what I am wearing, nothing." "I have been saving money," Ethan said. "It is not much, but it is enough to get us started. We can take 2 horses and head west. By the time your father realizes you are gone, we will be too far away for him to follow." It was insane. It was reckless. It was exactly what Penelope wanted to do. "Are you certain?" she asked. "If we do this, you will be giving up your life here, your business with Samuel, everything." "I am certain," Ethan said firmly. "Penelope, I love you. I know we have not known each other long, but I have never been more sure of anything. I want to build a life with you, whatever that looks like." Penelope felt tears building again, but this time they were tears of joy rather than despair. "I love you too," she said. "And yes, I will go with you. I will marry you if you still want me. If I still want you." Ethan pulled her close and kissed her fiercely. "I will always want you." They made plans quickly. Ethan would gather supplies and prepare 2 horses. Penelope would return home and pack whatever she could carry. They would meet at the corrals just before dawn and leave immediately, heading west toward the Arizona territory. Penelope made it back to her house without incident and crept back to her room. She lit a single candle and looked around at the trappings of her old life. What did she take? What was worth keeping? In the end, she packed light. A few practical dresses, her warmest shawl, the book of poetry that had been her mother's before marriage, had made her too busy for reading. She also took her mother's small jeweled brooch, not because it was valuable, but because it was the only thing she had that reminded her that her mother had once been young and hopeful too. She changed into her most practical traveling dress and lay down on her bed, fully clothed, to wait for dawn. She did not sleep, too keyed up with nervous excitement. She was really doing this. She was choosing her own path, whatever the consequences. The sky was just beginning to lighten when Penelope heard a soft tap at her window. She looked out to see Ethan on the ground below, waving urgently. This was it. The point of no return. She grabbed her bag and climbed out the window, using the same route she had used as a child when she wanted to climb the old oak tree in the yard. Her father had eventually had the lower branches cut off to prevent such unladylike behavior, but she could still reach the ground safely. Ethan caught her when she dropped the last few feet, steadying her. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready," she confirmed. They hurried through the sleeping town to the corrals. 2 horses were saddled and ready, packs secured behind the saddles. Samuel was there too, and to Penelope's surprise, he did not look angry. "So you two are running off," he said. "Cannot say I approve of the method, but I cannot blame you for the reasoning either." "I am sorry, Uncle Sam," Ethan said. "I know this leaves you in a difficult position." "I will manage," Samuel said gruffly. "I am more worried about you two. You have any idea where you are headed?" "West," Ethan said. "Maybe Arizona, maybe California, somewhere we can make a fresh start." Samuel nodded and pulled out a small leather pouch. "Take this. It is not much, but it will help." Ethan looked inside and his eyes widened. "Uncle Sam, this is too much." "Nonsense. You have worked hard for me these past years, and I have not always paid you what you were worth. Consider it back wages and a wedding present combined." He turned to Penelope. "You take care of my nephew, you hear? And Ethan, you take care of her. Marriage is not easy, and you two are starting with more than your share of obstacles. But if you have love and respect, you can build something good." "Thank you," Penelope said, deeply moved. "Thank you for everything, for giving me a chance when you did not have to." "You earned that chance," Samuel said. "Now get going before the town wakes up." They mounted their horses, and Penelope looked back at Glenrio one last time. Somewhere in that sleeping town was her father, the man who had valued her so little that he was willing to sell her to the highest bidder. Somewhere was her mother, who had long ago given up her own dreams and had never thought to fight for her daughters. But also somewhere in that town were the corrals where she had discovered her own strength, the places where she had learned that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. She was leaving behind a life that had been mapped out for her, stepping into complete uncertainty. And she had never felt more free. They rode west as the sun rose behind them, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The horses were fresh and eager, and they made good time. Ethan had chosen a route that avoided the main roads, knowing that when her father discovered her absence, he would likely send men after them. They rode hard for most of the morning, stopping only briefly to rest the horses. Penelope was not used to riding for such long periods, and by midday she was sore and tired. But she did not complain. This was her choice, and she would endure whatever came. Around mid-afternoon, they stopped near a small stream to water the horses and eat the food Samuel had packed for them. Penelope sat on a rock and looked around at the vast landscape. The terrain was gradually changing as they moved west, becoming more rugged and dramatic. "You are quiet," Ethan observed, sitting down beside her. "Having second thoughts?" "No," Penelope said immediately. "I was just thinking about how different everything looks already, like we have entered a new world." "In a way we have," Ethan said. "The life ahead of us is going to be nothing like the life you left behind." "Good," Penelope said firmly. "I did not like that life very much." Ethan smiled and took her hand. "When we stop tonight, I want to marry you properly. I know it will not be fancy and we do not have a preacher, but we can say the vows ourselves. In the eyes of God and each other, we will be married." "I would like that," Penelope said. The idea of a marriage without all the elaborate ceremony, without her father giving her away like property, appealed to her. This would be a marriage of choice, of mutual commitment, and that made it more meaningful than any church ceremony could be. They continued riding until the sun was low in the sky, then made camp in a sheltered spot beneath a rock overhang. Ethan started a small fire while Penelope tended to the horses, unsaddling them and rubbing them down the way she had been taught. The work was familiar and comforting after the strangeness of the day. When the fire was burning steadily, and they had eaten a simple meal of jerky and hardtack, Ethan stood and held out his hand to Penelope. She took it and stood beside him, facing him in the firelight. "I do not know the exact words," Ethan admitted. "But I know what I want to say. Penelope Crawford, I promise to love you and honor you for the rest of my life. I promise to be your partner, not your master. I promise to respect your dreams and support your goals. I promise to build a life with you based on honesty and trust and mutual respect. Will you marry me?" Penelope felt tears streaming down her face, but they were happy tears. "Ethan Mallory, I promise to love you and honor you for the rest of my life. I promise to be your partner in all things. I promise to work beside you and dream beside you. I promise to build a life with you that we both choose freely. Yes, I will marry you." They had no ring, no witnesses, no legal document. But as they kissed beneath the darkening sky, with only the stars and the crackling fire as witnesses, Penelope felt more married than any elaborate ceremony could have made her. That night, they lay together beneath the stars, and Penelope discovered what it meant to be with someone who saw her as an equal, who wanted her happiness as much as his own. It was tender and sometimes awkward, two people learning each other, but it was real and honest and chosen, and that made it perfect. They continued west for several more days, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and Glenrio. The landscape grew increasingly dramatic, with red rock formations and deep canyons. They saw few other people, which suited them fine. They were in no hurry to return to civilization. On the fifth day, they encountered a wagon train heading west toward California. The wagon master, a weathered man named Tom Sullivan, was friendly and invited them to share the evening meal with his group. "You two look like you are running from something," he observed as they ate stew around the communal fire. "Or running towards something," Ethan replied diplomatically. Tom laughed. "Fair enough. None of my business either way. But if you are looking for work, I could use another hand. One of my outriders broke his leg yesterday, and I need someone who can ride and shoot to help guard the train. Pay is not great, but it is steady, and you would have company and supplies for the journey." Ethan looked at Penelope, and she nodded slightly. "We would be interested," Ethan said. "What about your wife?" Tom asked. "Can she ride? Really ride, I mean, not that side saddle nonsense." "She can ride," Ethan said with a hint of pride. "She is still learning, but she has good instincts. Then she can help with the horses. We have got over 100 head being driven alongside the wagons. Always need people who know how to handle them. Between the two of you, you can earn enough to set yourselves up proper once we reach California." It was a better opportunity than they could have hoped for. They agreed immediately and spent the rest of the evening meeting the other members of the wagon train. There were families heading west in search of land, single men looking for gold, a few couples seeking fresh starts. Everyone had a story, everyone had left something behind. Penelope found herself welcomed by the other women, who appreciated having another pair of hands to help with the endless work of maintaining the camp. She learned to cook over an open fire, to mend clothes in ways that would actually hold, to identify edible plants and safe water sources. Skills her finishing school education had never included, but which were infinitely more useful. The journey was hard. They traveled 10 to 15 miles a day, always at the mercy of weather and terrain. There were river crossings where they had to float the wagons across, praying the current would not sweep them away. There were days of choking dust when the wind blew constantly. There were nights so cold that even huddled together, Penelope and Ethan could barely stay warm. But there was also beauty. Sunsets that painted the entire sky in colors Penelope had never imagined. Stars so numerous and bright that the night sky looked like scattered diamonds. The satisfaction of a hard day's work completed, of challenges overcome through effort and cooperation. And there was love. Despite the hardships, or perhaps because of them, Penelope's love for Ethan deepened. She watched him work with the horses, patient and skilled, earning the respect of the other men. She saw his kindness when a child in the train fell ill, the way he sat up half the night helping the parents care for the feverish boy. She experienced his strength when her own courage faltered, when the vastness of what they had done threatened to overwhelm her. In turn, Ethan watched Penelope transform. The sheltered banker's daughter disappeared, replaced by a capable woman who could ride hard all day and still have energy to help prepare the evening meal. She learned to handle a rifle, though she still hated the noise. She learned to negotiate with other women for supplies, to trade work for goods. She became an integral part of the wagon train community. About 6 weeks into the journey, they stopped at a small town for supplies. While Ethan was purchasing ammunition and other necessities, Penelope wandered into the general store. The proprietor, a friendly woman named Margaret, struck up a conversation. "You and your husband seem happy," Margaret observed. "Not always the case with folks on these wagon trains. Some are running from trouble and it follows them. But you two, you look like you are running toward something good." "I hope we are," Penelope said. "We are still figuring out exactly what our life will look like, but at least we are figuring it out together." "That is the secret," Margaret said. "My husband and I came west 30 years ago, back when this was really the frontier. We had nothing but each other and a willingness to work hard. Now look at us, successful business, 3 grown children, a good life. It was not easy, but it was worth it." Her words gave Penelope hope. If this woman had built a good life from nothing, perhaps she and Ethan could do the same. As they were leaving the store, Penelope noticed a wanted poster tacked to the wall. Her heart stopped. It was her. Or rather, it was a description of her, offering a reward for information leading to her return to her father in Glenrio, New Mexico. Margaret followed her gaze. "You see a lot of those out here, folks running from something or someone. My philosophy is that everyone deserves a chance to start over. What is past is past." Penelope looked at the older woman, wondering if she knew, if she suspected, but Margaret's expression was kind and non-judgmental. "Thank you," Penelope said quietly. "For what?" Margaret asked innocently. "I did not do anything. Just sold you some supplies, same as I would for anyone." Outside, Penelope showed Ethan the poster. His face darkened. "Your father is still looking for you." "Did you think he would not be?" Penelope asked. "I embarrassed him, cost him his alliance with Richard Thornton. He is not the type of man to let that go easily." "Then we need to be careful," Ethan said. "Once we get to California, we should change our names, start completely fresh." The idea made Penelope sad. She did not want to hide forever, did not want to live in fear of being discovered. But she understood the necessity. As long as her father was looking for her, as long as there was a price on her head, they would not be truly free. They rejoined the wagon train and continued west. The landscape grew even more dramatic as they crossed into Arizona territory. The desert here was harsh and beautiful, with towering saguaro cacti and mountains that glowed red in the sunset. Water was scarce, and they had to carefully ration their supplies between reliable sources. It was in Arizona that they faced their most serious challenge. One evening, as they were making camp, a group of men rode up. They were rough-looking, heavily armed, and their intentions were clearly not friendly. "We are looking for a woman," the leader said, a scarred man with cold eyes. "Banker's daughter who ran away from Glenrio. Heard she might be traveling with a wagon train headed west." Tom Sullivan stepped forward. "We do not have any banker's daughters here, just honest folks heading west to start new lives. You sure about that?" The man pulled out a piece of paper. It was the same wanted poster Penelope had seen in town, but this one had more details, including a physical description. Penelope's heart was pounding. She was standing behind one of the wagons with several other women, and she prayed the fading light would keep her hidden. Ethan was on the far side of the camp with the horses, too far away to help. "I am sure," Tom said firmly. "Now I am going to have to ask you gentlemen to move along. We do not allow armed strangers in our camp." The scarred man's expression turned ugly. "We are not going anywhere until we have checked every wagon, every face. That banker is offering a substantial reward, and I mean to collect it." The tension ratcheted up immediately. The men in the wagon train moved to defensive positions, hands on their weapons. The bounty hunters spread out, clearly preparing for trouble. Then one of the women, a widow named Sarah who had befriended Penelope, stepped forward. "You are looking for me," she said clearly. Everyone turned to stare at her. Sarah was at least 40, with gray streaked through her brown hair and a weathered face that spoke of years of hard living. She looked nothing like the description on the wanted poster. The scarred man looked skeptical. "You are saying you are Penelope Crawford, 20 years old, daughter of Charles Crawford of Glenrio, New Mexico." "I am saying I ran away from my father's house and I am not going back," Sarah said firmly. "And I am saying that these good people are protecting me because they know what it means when a woman has to run. Now you can try to take me, but you will have to go through every person in this camp to do it." The other women moved to stand beside Sarah, forming a protective wall. Then the men joined them, creating a solid line of defiance. The bounty hunters were outnumbered at least 3-1, and they knew it. The scarred man cursed and spat on the ground. "This is not over," he said. "That reward is still out there and someone will claim it eventually." He and his men rode off into the gathering darkness. When they were gone, everyone exhaled collectively. Tom immediately posted extra guards and had the wagons pulled into a tighter defensive circle. Penelope approached Sarah, her eyes full of tears. "Why did you do that? You could have been hurt, or worse." Sarah put a hand on Penelope's shoulder. "Because I know what it is like to be trapped in a life you did not choose. My first husband was a cruel man, and when he died, I felt like I had been let out of prison. No one should have to go back to their prison, especially not for someone else's profit." "Thank you," Penelope whispered. "Thank you so much." That night, Tom Sullivan called Ethan and Penelope to his wagon. "Those men will be back," he said bluntly. "Maybe not tonight or tomorrow, but eventually. The reward your father is offering is too large to ignore. You two need to disappear for a while, and it is not safe for you to do that with the wagon train." "What are you suggesting?" Ethan asked. "There is a trading post about 2 days north of here, run by a man named Jack Morrison. He is an old friend of mine and he can be trusted. Go there, lay low for a few months. Let your father's men chase the wagon train west while you wait for things to cool down. Then you can continue to California by a different route." It made sense, even though Penelope hated the idea of hiding. But the danger was real. If those bounty hunters came back with reinforcements, people could be hurt defending her. She could not let that happen. "We will go," Ethan agreed. They left before dawn the next morning, slipping away while the camp was still sleeping. Only Tom and Sarah knew they were going. Penelope hugged Sarah goodbye, this brave woman who had risked so much for a stranger. "Be happy," Sarah whispered. "That is the best revenge against people who tried to control you. Just be gloriously, defiantly happy." Penelope carried those words with her as she and Ethan rode north through the desert. The landscape here was even more stark and beautiful, with little vegetation beyond scrub brush and the occasional hardy cactus. They saw more wildlife, though, deer and jackrabbits, and once, in the distance, a small herd of pronghorn antelope. They reached the trading post on the evening of the second day. It was a low, adobe building surrounded by a few smaller structures, sitting in the middle of nowhere like a ship becalmed on an empty sea. Smoke rose from the chimney, a welcoming sign in the vast emptiness. Jack Morrison turned out to be a grizzled man in his 60s, with keen eyes and a ready laugh. He welcomed them warmly when Ethan explained their situation. "Tom Sullivan sent you. Well, any friend of Tom's is welcome here. I got a small cabin out back you can use. It is not fancy, but it is private and comfortable enough." The cabin was indeed small, just one room with a fireplace, a bed, and a rough table with 2 chairs. But it was clean and weatherproof, and after weeks of sleeping on the ground, it felt like luxury. Jack employed them immediately. Ethan worked with the horses that passing travelers left to trade or sell, and Penelope helped in the trading post itself, learning the intricacies of frontier commerce. Jack was a patient teacher and a good storyteller, and they passed many evenings listening to his tales of the old days when this region had been truly wild. "Things are changing," Jack said one night as they sat around his fire. "Railroad is coming, bringing civilization with it. In 20 years, this whole area will be tamed, settled, probably full of farms and towns. I'm not sure if that is progress or not." "It is inevitable," Ethan said. "People always want to push forward, explore new places, make them their own." "Maybe," Jack agreed, "but something is lost too. The freedom, the sense of endless possibility. Once everything is mapped and claimed and fenced, there is less room for folks who do not fit the mold." His words resonated with Penelope. She and Ethan were both people who did not fit the mold, and they had found each other in this wild place where fitting in mattered less than surviving and thriving. They spent 3 months at the trading post, and they were good months. Penelope and Ethan worked hard, saved their money, and built a quiet life together. They were properly married now, too. Jack had arranged for a traveling preacher to perform a legal ceremony, so they had both their private vows under the stars and the sanction of law and church. The work at the trading post taught Penelope skills she had never imagined needing. She learned to assess the value of goods, to negotiate fairly but firmly, to handle difficult customers with diplomacy. She learned to shoot more accurately and to trust her own judgment. She grew stronger, more confident, more certain of her own capabilities. One evening in late autumn, a traveler brought news from New Mexico. Charles Crawford, the banker from Glenrio, had died of a sudden heart attack. The shock of his daughter's disappearance, combined with the scandal and the broken engagement with Richard Thornton, had apparently been too much for him. Penelope's first emotion was not sadness but guilt. Had she killed her father by running away? Then she thought about the life he had planned for her, about Richard Thornton's cold assessment of her value, and the guilt faded. Her father had made his own choices, valued his own priorities. His death was tragic, but it was not her fault. "Are you all right?" Ethan asked that night as they lay in bed in their little cabin. "I do not know," Penelope admitted. "I should feel sadder, should not I? He was my father. He was also a man who tried to force you into a marriage with someone you did not love, someone who saw you as property rather than a person," Ethan said gently. "You do not owe him your grief if you do not feel it." "I feel sad for who he might have been," Penelope said slowly. "If he had valued love and family more than money and power, he might have been happy. We might have had a real relationship. But that was his choice, not mine. With her father's death, the wanted posters would likely be withdrawn. There was no one else with the motivation or resources to search for her. Her mother, Penelope knew, would not pursue her. Martha Crawford would probably be relieved to have the scandal die down, to fade into quiet widowhood without the constant reminder of her rebellious daughter. "We are free," Penelope said, the realization washing over her. Truly free. We do not have to hide anymore, do not have to worry about bounty hunters. Does that mean you want to go back? Ethan asked carefully. Go back to New Mexico, claim your inheritance. Penelope thought about it, but only for a moment. No, there is nothing there for me. Whatever money my father left will go to my mother, and she is welcome to it. I do not want anything from that life. What do you want? Ethan asked. Penelope turned to face him in the darkness. I want to keep moving forward. I want to go to California like we planned, find a place where we can start our horse training business. I want to build something with you, something that belongs to both of us. Then that is what we will do, Ethan promised. They left the trading post in early spring of 1880, when the weather was mild enough for safe travel. Jack was sorry to see them go, but understood their need to keep moving, to find their own place. You two have something special, he told them the morning they left. You have love, which is rarer than folks think, but you also have respect, partnership, equality. That is even rarer. Hold on to that and you will weather any storm. They traveled west through Arizona and into California. The landscape changed again, becoming more varied. They passed through forests of pine and oak, saw mountains capped with snow even in spring, crossed valleys that seemed to stretch forever. They finally settled in a small town in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada called Riverbend. It was a growing community, prosperous enough to support a horse training business but still small enough that newcomers were welcome. The land was beautiful, with rolling hills covered in golden grass and scattered oaks, backed by the dramatic peaks of the mountains. Using their savings and a small loan from the local bank, they purchased 10 acres on the edge of town and built a small house and training corrals. The work was hard, but Penelope had learned to love hard work. She discovered satisfaction in building something with her own hands, in seeing their dream take physical form. Their first year was challenging. They had to establish their reputation, prove that Ethan's training methods worked, convince skeptical ranchers to give them a chance. But slowly, steadily, word spread. Ethan's gentle training produced horses that were not just obedient but genuinely willing partners, and clients began to seek them out. Penelope found her own role in the business. While Ethan worked directly with the horses, she handled the business side. She negotiated contracts, kept the books, managed their finances. She also worked with the horses herself, training them in basic manners and handling. She discovered she had a particular talent for working with horses that had been mistreated, helping them learn to trust again. One day, about 2 years after they had settled in Riverbend, a familiar face appeared at their gate. It was Sarah, the widow from the wagon train who had protected Penelope from the bounty hunters. Sarah, Penelope ran to embrace her friend. What are you doing here? I finally made it to California, Sarah said with a tired smile. The wagon train moved slow, and I had some stops along the way, but I am here now. I heard through the traveler network that you two had settled in this area, so I thought I would look you up. They invited Sarah to stay with them, and over dinner she told them about her journey. She had decided to open a boarding house in Sacramento and was looking for investors. Penelope and Ethan immediately offered to help, contributing what they could spare from their growing business. You do not have to do this, Sarah protested. We want to, Penelope insisted. You helped us when we needed it. Let us return the favor. Sarah's boarding house opened 6 months later and quickly became successful. She catered to women traveling alone, providing safe lodging and employment assistance. Many of her boarders were like Penelope had been, running from lives that did not fit, looking for new possibilities. As Penelope and Ethan's business grew, so did their relationship. They continued to be partners in every sense, making decisions together, supporting each other's dreams. When disagreements arose, they talked through them, finding compromises that respected both their needs. 3 years after settling in Riverbend, Penelope realized she was pregnant. The news filled her with a complex mix of emotions. She was happy, certainly, but also anxious. She had watched women disappear into motherhood, losing their identities and independence to the demands of child rearing. Ethan sensed her concern. "We will figure this out together," he promised. "You do not have to stop being yourself to become a mother. We will find a way to balance everything." And they did. Their son was born in the spring of 1883, a healthy boy they named Samuel, after Ethan's uncle. Becoming a mother changed Penelope, but it did not diminish her. Ethan was a hands-on father, taking his share of the child care responsibilities. They built a system where Penelope could continue working with the horses, just in shorter shifts with breaks to nurse the baby. Samuel Mallory, the elder, came to visit when his namesake was 6 months old. He stayed for several weeks, delighting in meeting his great-nephew and seeing how his nephew and Penelope had built their life. "You did well," Samuel told Ethan one evening as they watched Penelope work with a young mare while their son napped nearby in a basket. "She is exactly the right partner for you." "I know," Ethan said. "I cannot imagine my life without her." Samuel turned to him. "You know what makes a good marriage. It is not just love, though love is important. It is respect. It is seeing your partner as a full person, not as someone to serve your needs. You two have that, and it shows in everything you do." One afternoon, when young Samuel was about a year old, Penelope was in town purchasing supplies when she encountered a face from her past. It was Richard Thornton, the man she had been engaged to marry. He looked older, more worn, and he clearly recognized her immediately. "Penelope Crawford," he said, his tone a mix of surprise and something else she could not quite identify. "Penelope Mallory now," she corrected calmly. Richard looked her over, taking in her simple dress, her work-roughened hands, the confident way she stood. "So you did run away. There were rumors, but I never quite believed them. I thought perhaps you had died or been kidnapped." "No, I chose to leave." "To avoid marrying me," Richard said flatly. "To avoid being forced into a marriage I did not want," Penelope corrected. "Nothing personal." Richard was quiet for a moment. "Your father blamed me, you know, said I must not have been impressive enough to secure your interest. The broken engagement damaged both our reputations. He died angry, and I spent 2 years cleaning up the mess." Penelope felt a twinge of sympathy, but only a twinge. "I am sorry for the difficulties you faced, but I am not sorry I left. What kind of life do you have now?" Richard asked, gesturing around the modest town. "This cannot be what you were raised for." "It is not," Penelope agreed. "It is better." She meant it. The life she had built with Ethan was richer and more fulfilling than anything she could have had as Richard's wife. She had work she loved, a partner who respected her, a son who brought her joy, and freedom she had earned through her own courage. Richard studied her face and seemed to see something there that surprised him. "You are happy," he said, sounding almost puzzled. "Yes, very happy." "Then I suppose things worked out for the best," Richard said. "I married again, a widow from Denver. No romance, but a comfortable partnership, better than I had with my first 2 wives." They parted cordially, and Penelope walked home feeling as if a final chapter of her old life had closed. She had faced her past and found it no longer had power over her. She was not the frightened girl who had thrown china in her father's study. She was a woman who had chosen her own path and built a life she was proud of. The years passed peacefully. The horse training business continued to thrive, and they were able to expand their property and build better facilities. They hired help, taking on young people interested in learning Ethan's training methods. Some moved on to start their own businesses, while others stayed and became permanent employees. Penelope gave birth to 2 more children, a daughter they named Rose, and another son they named Jack, after the trading post owner who had sheltered them. The house, which had started as a small cabin, grew with their family, rooms added as needed. Penelope continued to work with the horses throughout her pregnancies and after the births. She developed a reputation in her own right as a skilled trainer, particularly with difficult horses. She wrote articles about humane training methods that were published in agricultural journals, contributing to a slowly growing movement away from harsh breaking techniques. Ethan's uncle Samuel eventually sold his business in Glenrio and moved to California to be near them. He helped with the horse training and spent countless hours with his great-nieces and nephews, telling them stories of the old days and teaching them everything he knew about horses. One evening, when they had been in Riverbend for nearly 10 years, Penelope and Ethan sat on their porch watching the sunset. Their 3 children were playing in the yard, their laughter carrying on the warm breeze. The corrals were full of horses in various stages of training, and in the distance they could see the mountains turning purple in the fading light. "You ever regret it?" Ethan asked. "Giving up your father's money, the comfortable life you could have had?" Penelope took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "Never. Not for a single moment. I gave up money, but I gained everything that actually matters." She looked at their children, at the business they had built together, at the life they had chosen. "Back in Glenrio, when my father told me I had to marry Richard Thornton, I felt like my life was worthless, like I was just a commodity to be traded, but you showed me something different." "What did I show you?" Ethan asked softly. Penelope turned to face him, seeing the same green eyes that had first captivated her all those years ago at the training corrals, now crinkled with smile lines at the corners. "You showed me that partnership is possible, that love can be built on respect and equality, that I had value beyond what I could bring to a business arrangement." She paused, then said the words that had been in her heart since those early days. "Your love is priceless to me, Ethan, not because it cost anything in money or status, but because it is freely given and freely received. It is built on truth and respect and genuine affection. That is worth more than all my father's money could ever buy." Ethan pulled her close and kissed her forehead. "You are priceless to me too. You are brave and strong and kind. You have built a life that honors who you really are, not who someone else wanted you to be. I am so proud of you." They sat together as the stars began to appear, feeling grateful for the journey that had brought them here. It had not been an easy path. There had been hardships and sacrifices and moments of real fear, but they had faced it all together, and they had created something beautiful. Young Samuel came running up to the porch, his face flushed with excitement. "Papa, can you tell us the story again, about how you and Mama met?" Ethan laughed. "Again? I told you that story last week. But we want to hear it again," Rose chimed in, joining her brother. Little Jack toddled over too, not wanting to be left out even though he was too young to really understand. Penelope and Ethan exchanged amused glances. Their love story had become family legend, told and retold until it had taken on an almost mythical quality. "All right," Ethan agreed. "Come sit down and I will tell you." The children settled on the porch steps and Ethan began. "Once upon a time, there was a beautiful young woman who lived in a fancy house but felt like a prisoner. Her father wanted to force her to marry a man she did not love, a man who saw her as property rather than a person." "That is the bad part," Samuel interrupted. "But then comes the good part." "Yes," Ethan agreed. "The good part is when your mother made a choice to learn about horses. She came to the training corrals where I worked with my Uncle Samuel, and she was braver than anyone I had ever met. She was willing to work hard, to get dirty, to learn new things. She did not care that it was not proper for a lady. She just wanted to be true to herself. "And you fell in love with her," Rose said dreamily. "I did," Ethan confirmed. "I fell in love with her courage and her kindness and her determination. And when I realized she was going to be forced into a marriage she did not want, I asked her to run away with me instead." "And she said yes," Samuel exclaimed. "She chose freedom, she did," Ethan said, smiling at Penelope. "We ran away together with nothing but 2 horses and hope. We traveled with a wagon train, worked at a trading post, and finally came here to Riverbend and built this business and this family." "Tell them the important part," Penelope prompted. Ethan nodded. "The important part is this. Your mother and I chose each other. No one forced us together. No one arranged our marriage for business reasons. We chose to be partners, to build a life together based on love and respect. And that is what I hope for all of you. That you will have the courage to choose your own paths, and the wisdom to choose partners who value you for who you really are." The children absorbed this wisdom with the seriousness of youth, then ran off to continue their games before bedtime. Penelope and Ethan remained on the porch, sitting close together as the night deepened around them. "You think we are doing right by them?" Penelope asked. "Raising them to be independent, to question authority, to choose their own paths. The world may not always reward those qualities." "The world did not reward those qualities in us either," Ethan pointed out. "We had to fight for everything we have, but I would not change anything. Our children will face their own challenges, but at least they will face them knowing they have choices, knowing they do not have to accept lives they do not want." Penelope nodded. They were raising their children very differently from how either of them had been raised. Samuel, Rose, and Jack all learned to ride astride, all learned to work with horses regardless of their gender. They were taught to read and do arithmetic, but also to think critically, to ask questions, to form their own opinions. It was not always easy. The other families in town sometimes raised eyebrows at the Mallory children, particularly at Rose, who at 8 years old could rope a calf and ride as well as any boy her age. But Penelope and Ethan stood firm in their approach, believing that their children deserved the freedom to become whoever they were meant to be. As the years continued to pass, their business grew from a local operation to one with regional recognition. Trainers came from other states to learn Ethan's methods. Penelope published a book on humane horse training that was widely read and discussed. They became advocates for better treatment of animals in general, speaking at agricultural fairs and writing letters to newspapers. Their advocacy sometimes made them controversial. There were people who believed that animals existed solely for human use, and that concerns about their welfare were silly sentimentality. But Penelope and Ethan persisted, knowing that real change always faced resistance. When Samuel was 15, Rose 13, and Jack 11, an opportunity arose that tested their family's adaptability. A wealthy rancher in Nevada wanted to hire Ethan for 6 months to help establish a horse training program on his property. The pay was exceptional, enough to fund several years of expansion for their business. But it would mean Ethan being gone for half a year. Penelope could run the business in his absence, with help from the employees and Uncle Samuel. But they would miss him terribly, and the family dynamics would be disrupted. They made the decision together, as they always did. The opportunity was too good to pass up, and Penelope was capable of managing things at home. Ethan would travel to Nevada, set up the training program, and return as soon as the job was completed. Those 6 months were difficult. Penelope missed Ethan's presence, his partnership, his support, but she also discovered new depths of her own capability. She handled problems she had never dealt with before, made decisions without consulting him, proved to herself and others that she was a skilled businesswoman in her own right. The children grew closer to their mother during this time, seeing her strength and competence. Rose, in particular, thrived, taking on more responsibility and discovering her own talent for horse training. When Ethan finally returned home, the reunion was joyful. He brought back not just the promised payment, but also new ideas and techniques he had learned. But more importantly, he brought renewed appreciation for what they had built together. "I missed you every single day," he told Penelope that first night. "The work was interesting, the people were fine, but none of it mattered because you were not there to share it with. This is where I belong, here with you and our children." "I missed you too," Penelope admitted. "But I also learned that I am stronger than I knew. I can run this business on my own if I have to. I do not need you, Ethan. I choose you. There is a difference." Ethan understood what she meant. Their partnership was built on choice, not need. They were both capable individuals who chose to build something together because it made both their lives richer, not because either was incomplete without the other. As their children grew into young adults, Penelope and Ethan watched them make their own choices. Samuel surprised them by deciding to become a veterinarian, heading east to attend school and learn the latest medical techniques. Rose stayed with the family business, becoming an exceptional trainer in her own right. Jack developed a passion for writing and began documenting the stories of the people and animals he encountered, with dreams of becoming a journalist. Each child's path was different, but all of them carried forward the values their parents had instilled. Choose your own way. Respect all living things. Build partnerships based on equality and mutual respect. Stand up for what you believe in, even when it is difficult. Uncle Samuel passed away peacefully in his sleep when he was nearly 80 years old. His death was sad but not tragic, a life well lived coming to its natural conclusion. The whole town turned out for his funeral, testimony to the impact he had made on the community. At the reception after the service, story after story emerged about Samuel's kindness and generosity. He had given countless people chances when no one else would. He had taught young people to work with horses, lent money to those in need, offered wisdom freely to anyone who asked. "He would have been proud of you," an old rancher told Ethan. "Proud of what you have built here, how you have carried forward his legacy." Ethan nodded, tears in his eyes. "Everything I know about horses, about integrity, about being a good person, I learned from him. I hope I have honored that teaching." "You have," the rancher assured him. "You and your wife both. You have created something special here, something that will last long after you are gone." As Penelope and Ethan entered their 50s, they began gradually stepping back from the day-to-day operations of the business. Rose was more than capable of running things, and she brought her own innovations and ideas. Samuel returned from veterinary school and opened a practice in Riverbend, specializing in large animals. Jack's articles about ranch life were being published in newspapers across the West. Penelope and Ethan remained active in the business, but also took time to travel, to visit places they had always wanted to see. They went to San Francisco and marveled at the bustling city. They traveled back east and saw the very different landscape and culture there. They even made a trip back to New Mexico, though not to Glenrio, standing on the edge of the desert where they had first run away together all those years ago. Penelope reflected on the journey. "It has been a good life," she said to Ethan. "Better than I ever imagined possible." "Better than I deserved," Ethan said. "No," Penelope disagreed. "You deserved every bit of it. You are a good man, Ethan Mallory. You have been a wonderful husband, a devoted father, a respected businessman. You have lived your values and made the world a little bit better." "We did it together," Ethan reminded her. "Everything we have built, we built as partners." They returned to Riverbend with renewed appreciation for what they had created. The business was thriving under Rose's leadership. Samuel's veterinary practice was busy and successful. Jack had just gotten engaged to a woman he met while covering a story, a schoolteacher who shared his passion for words and stories. One evening, as Penelope and Ethan sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, they talked about the future. "What do you want to do with the rest of our lives?" Ethan asked. "We are not old yet, but we are not young anymore either. What dreams are still left to fulfill?" Penelope thought about it. "I want to write more," she decided. "Not just about horses, but about everything. About the journey we have taken, about the choices we have made, about what it means to build a life based on mutual respect and love. Maybe it will help someone else who is trapped the way I was, show them that there are other options." "I think that is a wonderful idea," Ethan said. "What else?" "I want to see our grandchildren," Penelope said. "Samuel wrote that his wife is expecting. I want to be there for that, want to be the kind of grandparent who actually knows and supports their grandchildren, not the distant figure my own grandparents were." "More grandchildren would be nice," Ethan agreed. "Though I suspect Rose is too focused on the horses to think about marriage anytime soon." He was right. Rose was 32 and showed no signs of settling down. She had several suitors over the years, but had never found anyone who could match her passion for horses or accept her unconventional approach to life. Penelope worried about her sometimes, but Rose seemed content with her choices. Samuel's first child, a daughter, was born that fall. They named her Penelope, and when Penelope held her tiny namesake for the first time, she felt the circle of life completing itself. This new Penelope would grow up in a world different from the one her grandmother had known, a world with more opportunities for women, though still far from equal. But she would grow up knowing she came from a long line of strong women who made their own choices. She would hear the story of her grandmother's escape, her courage in choosing love over duty. She would learn that her value was inherent, not dependent on who she married or what she could provide to a man. Jack's wedding took place in Riverbend the following spring, a joyful celebration that brought together friends and family from across the region. Penelope watched her youngest son marry his beloved and felt deep satisfaction. Jack had found a true partner, someone who valued his dreams and supported his ambitions while pursuing her own goals. As the years continued to pass, Penelope worked on her book. It was not just a manual on horse training, but a memoir of her journey from trapped daughter to independent woman. She wrote about the lessons she had learned, about the importance of choosing your own path, about what real love looked like. She also wrote honestly about the challenges, about the times she and Ethan had argued, about the financial struggles, about the loneliness of being different in a world that valued conformity. She did not want to paint an unrealistic picture, but rather to show that a life lived authentically was worth the difficulties. The book was published when Penelope was 57 years old. It sold modestly at first, but word of mouth spread and it found its audience. Women, particularly, responded to Penelope's story. She received letters from all over the country, from women who felt trapped in lives they had not chosen, from women who were considering defying their family's expectations, from women who just needed to know that someone else understood their struggles. Penelope tried to respond to as many letters as she could, offering encouragement and practical advice. She became a reluctant advocate for women's rights, speaking occasionally at meetings and writing articles for reform-minded publications. Ethan supported her work wholeheartedly, proud of her courage in sharing their story. He had always known Penelope was extraordinary, but seeing her impact spread far beyond their small town filled him with admiration. They celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary with a large party that included not just family and friends, but also the young people they had trained over the years, now established trainers and ranchers themselves. The testimonials that evening moved both Penelope and Ethan to tears. "You taught me that there was another way to work with horses," one young man said. "But more than that, you taught me that there was another way to live, with integrity, with kindness, with respect for all living things. That has shaped my entire life." A young woman stood up. "You showed me that being female does not mean being limited, that I can work with horses, run a business, be taken seriously. When everyone else told me to give up my dreams and find a husband, you told me I could do both, or either or neither, whatever made me happy. That gave me the courage to keep going." Story after story, each one a testament to the ripple effects of Penelope and Ethan's choices. They had not just built a business or raised a family. They had created a legacy of respect, equality, and courage that extended far beyond their immediate circle. As they grew older, their roles shifted again. They became the elders of the family, the repository of wisdom and stories. Grandchildren came frequently to hear tales of the old days, and Penelope and Ethan delighted in sharing not just their own story, but the stories of others they had known. The wagon train family, Jack Morrison at the trading post, Samuel Mallory the elder. Rose eventually did marry, at age 42, to a widower with 3 children who needed a strong woman to help raise them. It was not a conventional romance, but it was a good partnership, and Rose thrived in her expanded role as trainer, stepmother, and eventually grandmother to her stepchildren's children. Penelope published 2 more books, each one exploring different aspects of building a life based on authentic choices. She became a recognized voice in the growing women's movement, though she was always careful to acknowledge that her path was just one of many valid options. "I do not think every woman needs to run away and become a horse trainer," she told an interviewer. "But I do think every woman deserves the chance to choose her own path, to discover her own talents and passions, to build a life that feels true to who she is. That is what I am advocating for, the freedom to choose." As Ethan approached 70, his health began to decline. Nothing dramatic, just the slow accumulation of years of hard physical work. His joints ached more, he tired more easily, he moved a bit slower. But his mind remained sharp, and his love for Penelope never wavered. "I have had a good life," he told her one evening as they sat in their usual spot on the porch, watching another sunset. "Better than I ever imagined when I was a young man training horses in Glenrio." "You made all the difference, Penelope. Loving you has been the greatest adventure of my life." Penelope took his hand, feeling the calluses and scars of decades of work, the strength that remained even as age crept in. "The adventure is not over yet," she said. "We still have more sunsets to watch, more grandchildren to spoil, more stories to tell." And they did. Ethan lived to be 78, active and engaged until almost the very end. When he finally passed away, peacefully in his sleep with Penelope beside him, the outpouring of grief from the community was profound. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives Ethan had touched. Samuel, now in his 60s and a highly respected veterinarian, delivered the eulogy. "My father taught me many things," he said. "How to read a horse's body language, how to build trust through consistency and patience, how to run a business with integrity. But the most important thing he taught me was how to love. He showed me every single day what it looks like to truly partner with someone, to to respect and honor them, to build a life together based on equality and mutual affection. He and my mother created something rare and beautiful, and they shared it generously with everyone around them. After Ethan's death, Penelope continued living in the house they had built together. She was 74 years old and still sharp as ever, though she missed Ethan with an ache that never quite faded. She stayed involved with the business, now being run by the third generation of Mallorys, and continued writing and speaking when invited. One afternoon, 2 years after Ethan's death, a young woman came to visit. She was 21 years old, traveling alone, and she carried a well-worn copy of Penelope's first book. "Mrs. Mallory," she said nervously, "I hope you do not mind me coming here unannounced. I just had to meet you to thank you. Your book changed my life." Penelope invited her in for tea, and the young woman told her story. She had been engaged to a man her father had chosen, a man who frightened her. Reading Penelope's book had given her the courage to refuse, to insist on making her own choice. Her father had been furious, but she had held firm, and eventually he had relented. "I am not running away like you did," the young woman explained. "I am staying and fighting for change from within, but knowing that you had the courage to choose yourself, that gave me courage too. So thank you." Penelope felt tears building. This was why she had written the book, why she had shared her story. "What will you do now?" she asked. "I am going to college," the young woman said. "I am going to study law and fight for women's rights. Things are changing, Mrs. Mallory. Women can vote now in some states, we can own property, we have more options than ever before. But we still have so far to go, and I want to be part of that change." "Then I know the world is in good hands," Penelope said. "You remind me of myself at your age, though you are far braver than I was. I ran away, but you are staying to fight. That takes even more courage." They talked for hours, and when the young woman finally left, Penelope felt a deep sense of peace. Her life had mattered. The choices she and Ethan had made had rippled out in ways they could never have imagined, touching lives and changing futures. Penelope lived to be 82 years old. She remained active and engaged until the very end, writing, speaking, mentoring young people, and spending time with her ever-expanding family. When she finally passed away, peacefully in her sleep, just like Ethan had, it was in the same house they had built together, surrounded by pictures and memories of a life well lived. Her funeral was even larger than Ethan's had been. People came from across the country, including the young law student who had visited years earlier. Now, a successful attorney arguing women's rights cases in court. There were trainers who had learned from Penelope and Ethan, former students Penelope had mentored, women whose lives had been changed by reading her books. Rose, now 70 years old herself, stood to speak. "My mother was extraordinary," she said. "Not because she was perfect or because her life was easy. She was extraordinary because she had the courage to choose authenticity over comfort. She walked away from wealth and status to pursue love and freedom. She built a life based on partnership and mutual respect. And then she shared what she learned, helping countless others find their own paths." Rose paused, gathering her emotions. "The greatest gift my parents gave me was the freedom to become myself. They never tried to force me into a mold, never limited me because of my gender, never told me my dreams were impossible. They showed me that with courage and hard work and love, anything is possible. That legacy lives on in all of us who had the privilege of knowing them." The Mallory horse training business continued for another generation, before being sold to a former student who promised to maintain its principles and methods. The house where Penelope and Ethan had lived became a small museum, preserving their story for future generations. Penelope's books remained in print, finding new audiences with each passing decade. But their truest legacy was not in business success or literary fame. It was in the lives they had touched, the courage they had inspired, the model they had provided of what love could be when built on equality and respect. It was in their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, who carried forward the values of choosing authentically, treating all beings with respect, and building partnerships based on mutual honor. The story of the banker's daughter who fell in love with the horse-training cowboy became part of local legend, told and retold, embellished and romanticized over the years. But at its core remained the simple truth that Penelope had spoken to Ethan all those years ago on their porch, watching another beautiful sunset. "Your love is priceless to me. Not because it cost anything, but because it was freely given and freely received." Built on truth and respect and genuine affection, it created something more valuable than all the money in all the banks in the world. It created a life of meaning, purpose, and deep connection that enriched not just their own existence, but the lives of everyone they touched. And in the end, is that not what every love story should be? Not a fairy tale of perfect people living perfect lives, but a real story of flawed humans choosing each other every day, building something beautiful through patience, partnership, and unwavering respect. The kind of love that changes not just two lives but radiates outward, making the whole world a little bit better. That was the legacy of Penelope and Ethan Mallory, and it endured long after they were gone, a testament to the transformative power of love chosen freely, lived authentically, and shared generously with the world.